I will give a brief overview of the last part of our story for those of you who weren't here last time, because we had part one of the story last night, because it's the first night of Hanukkah, and then tonight is the second night of Hanukkah. Okay, does anybody remember what Hanukkah means? Rededication. Last time, then this is the story of what happened about 160 years before Jesus was born. And this is why Jesus celebrated this same feast that we're celebrating right now. Jesus did himself. So we're doing the same thing that Jesus did. And this is what he was celebrating. In our land, where our people lived, in the land of Israel, everything was going okay. And you ever heard of Alexander the Great?
Yes.
He was one of the strongest generals that ever ruled the world, and he ruled the whole known world at the time. But he was dying, and so he died. But before he died, he found his four most powerful generals in his army and said, I don't have any kids, and I'm about to die, so I'm going to give you guys my kingdom. And to you, you're going to get 1/4 of my kingdom. And to you, you're going to get 1/4 of my kingdom. And to you, you're going to get 1/4 of my kingdom. And to you, you're going to get 1/4 of my kingdom. Sorry, ladies, we don't give kingdoms to women at this time. So these four kings began to rule the world. And it became kind of ugly because they sometimes fought each other, and it became an ugly situation. Yep, it got ugly, and everybody wanted to fight. Now, this one truly evil descendant of one of those kings had a special name. Does anybody remember his name? Antiochus Epiphanes. But what did we call him? We called him not Epiphanes, but Epimanes, which means madman. That's right. His name, Antiochus Epiphanes, means Antiochus, the God-man. But we called him Antiochus Epimanes, which is Antiochus the madman. And he began to rule over our land. Now, Tink, what he did was he said, all right, all you people who worship God, the one from the Bible, no more of that. You cannot worship the God of the Bible anymore. I have a different God, and his name is Jupiter. You're gonna worship him now, okay? And you can't read your Bibles anymore. If I catch any of you reading your Bibles, you will be killed. You can't worship on the Sabbath anymore. If I catch you worshiping on the Sabbath, you'll be killed. You have to work on the Sabbath. Any of these holy days like Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Pentecost, don't celebrate any of those or you'll be killed. Now, he also took, and anybody who disobeyed him and decided to worship our God anyway, he killed them. So a lot of people died. And he took over our temple where our God was worshipped. He took out the Ark of the Covenant, if he could find it. I'm not sure if it was there at the time. But he put a statue of his god, Jupiter, in our holy temple. And then he took our sacrificial altar where we sacrificed animals to our God. And what did he sacrifice on it? Pigs, which is totally unclean. And so he defiled our temple, destroyed our people, and made them do things his way. But this is the story, this next part is the story of what happens when a few people stood up and said, I don't think so. We're not going to do what you say anymore. We're going to fight back. Now, you would think this would be crazy because this evil king, Antiochus Epiphanes, had a huge bunch of armies. And it was just a small group of guys who stood up with their swords and said, we're not going to do it. Okay? So now I am going to light the candle, and you'll learn about why we're lighting the candles over these next few days. It's because they recaptured our city and took it away from this evil king and set up the worship of our God again. And they did it over a period of 8 days. They rededicated themselves for 8 days. And that's why we have 8 candles, with one that is called the shamash, that is the servant candle of the other candles, and it lights the other one. Now I light the center candle. My firstborn son lights the first candle, and my secondborn son lights the second candle. And then any of you guys who want for the next night can light the other candles. Okay? So first, I am going to, Jacob, would you like to light the shamash candle? Would you like to play with fire, Jacob? Okay, here we go. I'm going to light the shamash. Okay, the shamash candle is the servant candle. That is the center candle on every menorah. Okay? Now, my firstborn son will light the first candle with the shamash candle. Go ahead, sir. He'll light the first one, and then he'll put the shamash candle back in its holder. And my second son will take the shamash candle and light the second candle of the Night of Hanukkah. Excellent. And he'll put that back in the shamash candle holder. Now what we'll do as soon as the story is done is we take this light and we put it by the front window with the windows open so everyone outside can see that we have our menorah burning. And why did Jesus tell us that we were supposed to be lights in the world? Yes, he did. And this is an example of that. So here's part 2 of the story. Are you ready? I will pray before we begin. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed miracles for our forefathers in those days at this time. And also blessed are you, O Lord our God, the King of the universe, who has given us life and has taken care of us and enabled us to reach this special occasion. Now here's part 2 of the story. During that time, a priest of the Jehoiarib family named Mattathias, who was the son of John and the grandson of Simeon, moved from Jerusalem because there was great evil in the city of Jerusalem, and he settled in a town called Modin. And Mattathias had 5 sons: John, that was also called Gadi; Simon, who was also called Thassi; Judas, who was also called Maccabeus; Eliezer, who was also called Avaram; and Jonathan, also called Aphus. Now, when Mattathias saw all of the terrible sins that were being committed by the people in Judea and in the city of Jerusalem, he said, "Why was I born to see all these terrible things, the ruin of my people and the holy city? Why must I sit here helpless while the city is surrendered to enemies and the temple falls into the hands of foreigners? The temple is like someone without honor. Its splendid furnishings have been carried away like loot. Our children have been killed in the streets, and our young men have been killed by the sword of the enemy. Every nation in the world has occupied our city and robbed her of her treasures. All of her fancy ornaments have been stripped away, and she is now like a slave, no longer free. Look at our temple, profaned by the heathens, emptied of all of its splendor. Why should we go on living?" And in their grief, Mattathias and his sons tore their clothes and put on rough clothing that was not very comfortable, and continued in deep mourning. What is deep mourning? Like if you're mourning for the loss of someone, they're crying and being really sad, right? Yep. Now, when the king's officials, that's King Antiochus Epiphanes, who were forcing the people to turn from the living God, came to the town of Modin to force the people there to offer pagan sacrifices, many of the Israelites came to meet them, including Mattathias and his sons. And the king's officials said to Mattathias, because he was one of the leaders, "You are a respected leader in this town." Evan, please sit. Thank you, sir. "And you have the support of your sons and relatives and all the people." Yes, Brandon? Evan wants to tell you something? Lexi wants to tell you something? What is it? Okay. Okay, everyone listen and pay attention, please. Tink. So the leaders said to this guy Mattathias, "You are a great leader and all the people respect you. Why not be the first one here to do what the king has commanded? All of the Gentiles and the people of Judea and all the people left in the city of Jerusalem have already done it. If you do, you and your sons will be honored by the title Friends of the King, and you will be rewarded with silver and gold and many gifts." So he's telling them, just do it. Just worship our false gods. Just worship the gods the way we do, and we'll give you money and power, silver and gold, and you will be special. And Mattathias said this in a loud voice, "I don't care if every Gentile in this empire has obeyed the king and done what he said, and done the commandment to abandon the religion of his ancestors. My children, my relatives, and I will continue to keep the covenant with our God, the covenant that he made with our ancestors. With God's help, we will never abandon his law or disobey his commandments. We will not obey the king's decree, and we will not change our way of worship in the least." And just as he finished speaking, some man from Modin decided to go ahead and obey the king's decree and stepped out in front of everyone in order to offer a pagan sacrifice on the altar that stood there. And when Mattathias saw him, he became angry enough to do what had to be done. Shaking with rage, he ran forward and killed the man right there on the altar. He also killed the royal official from the king, who was forcing the people to sacrifice, and then he tore down the altar to the foreign god. In this way, Mattathias showed he was deeply devoted to our God and to his instructions, just as Phinehas had done long ago when he killed the son of Zimri. Now, then Mattathias went through the town, shouting, "Everyone who is faithful to our God and his covenant, and who obeys his laws, follow me." And with this, he and his sons fled the city and ran into the mountains, leaving in the town everything that they owned. At that time also, many of the Israelites who were seeking to be right with God through obedience to his instructions went out to live in the wilderness with them, taking their children, their wives, and their animals, because of the terrible things that were happening in their cities. And the report soon reached the king's officials and the soldiers in the fort at Jerusalem that some men had defiled the king's command and had got into hiding in the wilderness. And a large force of soldiers pursued them and caught up with them and set up camp opposite them and prepared to attack them on the Sabbath day. "There is still time," they shouted out to the people hiding in the caves. "Come out and obey the king's commandment, and we won't kill you." "We will not come out," they answered. "We will not obey the king's commandment, and we will not fight you on the Sabbath day." Now the soldiers attacked them immediately, but the people of our God did nothing to resist them. They did not even throw stones or block the entrances to the caves that they were hiding in. They said, "We will all die with a clear conscience, with no guilt. Let heaven and earth bear witness against us that you slaughtered us without a reason." And so the enemy attacked them on the Sabbath day and killed the men, their wives, their children, and their animals. About 1,000 people who had fled into the wilderness died.
Did any of the ones that fled live?
Not that group, no, because they kind of had an idea from the scriptures that God said you're supposed to rest on the Sabbath. But they had to think about it, and they all died when they really didn't need to, because they come to a decision here rather quickly. Mattathias and his friends heard about this news, and they were greatly saddened, and said to each other, "If all of us do just as our brethren have done, and refuse to fight these Gentiles and defend our lives and our religion on the Sabbath day, we will soon be wiped off of the face of the earth. They'll just kill us all on a Sabbath day, because they know we won't fight." Now on that day, they decided that if anyone attacked them on the Sabbath, they would defend themselves, and so that they would not all die just as the others of their brethren had died. Remember when Yeshua was here on the earth and he used to argue with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he said, "Man, you guys do all kinds of crazy rules on the Sabbath, but I'm telling you what, if you had a donkey that fell into a pit and he was your favorite donkey, wouldn't you get him out? Would you get out let's say your cat or your dog fell into a hole, would you get him out on the Sabbath day?" even though God says you're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath day? Is it work?
No.
Not really. So that's what he's saying. He's saying God says it's okay to defend your own life on the Sabbath day. So those other people had a bit of confusion, and they refused to fight on the Sabbath day, and so they all died. But these guys said, we can't do that, or they'll just kill us all on the Sabbath day. Now, they had weapons. They just decided, we're not going to fight on the Sabbath day because we're supposed to be resting. But they didn't really understand that God was not requiring of them to just die. God has rules that says if someone's attacking you, you are allowed to fight back. And so, Mattathias and his friends were joined by another group of devout and patriotic peoples of the followers of God, the bravest and strongest men in all Israel, who had volunteered to defend our God and his instructions. In addition, everyone who was running away from the persecution in the cities joined them and strengthened their forces. Now that they had an army, they gave vent to their anger by attacking the renegade people of their own who had chosen to go over and sacrifice to pagan gods. And those who escaped were forced to flee to the pagans for safety. And Mattathias and his friends went everywhere, tearing down the altars to these pagan gods and circumcising by force every uncircumcised boy they found within the borders of Israel. They were also successful in hunting down the arrogant Gentile officials. They rescued the laws of Moses, the books of the Bible, from the Gentiles and their kings, and broke the power of the wicked king Antiochus. Now when the time came for Mattathias to die, because he was old, he said to his sons, "These are times of violence and distress, my sons. Arrogant people are in control and have made us an object of ridicule. But you, my sons, must be devoted to our God and to his instructions, and be ready to die to defend God's covenant with our people. Remember what our ancestors did and how much they accomplished in their day. Remember, for example, follow their example, and you will be rewarded with great glory and undying fame. Remember how Abraham put his trust in Jehovah when he was tested, and how Jehovah was pleased with him and accepted him. And Joseph also, when he was in trouble and was sold as a slave into Egypt, he obeyed God's commands and became the ruler over the whole land of Egypt. And Phinehas, our ancestor, because of his burning devotion, was given the promise that his descendants would always be priests. And Joshua was made a judge in Israel because he obeyed the commandments of Moses. And Caleb bought back a good report of the land and was given a reward. David was made our king and was given the promise that one of his descendants would always be kings because of his steadfast loyalty to God. And so he's reminding them of all of the strong people who fought in previous times and encouraging them to be strong and courageous. He says, "But you, my sons, be strong and courageous in defending the laws of our God, because it is through the law that you will earn great glory. Your brother Simon is wise. He will always listen to you, as he would to me. And Judas, your brother, called the Hammer, has been strong all his life. He will be your commander and will lead you in battle against the enemy. Call everyone who obeys God's law to rally around you, and then avenge the wrongs done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles for what they have done, and always obey the law and its commandments." And then Mattathias gave them his blessing, and then he died. He was buried in his family tomb in Modin, and all the people of Israel went into crying for him. This happened in the year 146 before the birth of Yeshua, our Messiah. So that's part 2. Now part 3, which will be tomorrow night, they will begin to organize themselves for battle and have amazing, miraculous victories over their enemies, which have much stronger and larger forces, even war elephants. Cool stuff. Okay, now we're moving our candles. Yes? This is what is this called?
A menorah.
This is a menorah. A kippah.
A kippah?
Kippah.
Oh, I thought it was called something else.
Kippah. Some people call it a yarmulke. We wear these on our heads because Yeshua said that we are all priests of our God. And in the olden times, the priests wore little head coverings. And so each of you is a priest. And when you turn 13 years old and you become a young man or a young woman, you begin to be able to wear a kippah, or a head covering, or a shawl, or even the tzitzit. Tzitzit. My little stringies. Yes?
Is that about humility?
It's also about being humble before your God. God is your covering. So now we're going to move our candelabrum, our Hanukkah, out to our front so that all the people around can see our light shining into the world. Are you ready? You go lead the way and make sure that the way is clear for the Hanukkah.
Wait, how about he says, "In Judaism"?